Have you ever felt like no one really knows you? Have you ever felt that, no matter how surrounded by friends you are, there's a silence between you, an abyss impossible to bridge? Maybe you've never told anyone this, maybe not even yourself, but deep down something inside you has always known your relationships are just a polished surface, a performance. No one sees the real you, and the cruelest thing is, not even you have the courage to look at yourself without the disguise. Carl Jung discovered why, and what he revealed could shake everything you believe about friendship and intimacy. We all wear masks, but I'm not talking about the masks we choose to deliberately deceive. Those aren't the ones that hurt the most. The worst are the ones that stick to our faces without us realizing it. The ones we wear every day when we wake up, unaware that we are no longer ourselves, but merely the character we learn to be accepted. Jung called this mask persona psychological device so well crafted that we end up believing it to be our essence. And that's why you feel alone. No one loves you. They love the character you play. How many times have you caught yourself trying to please, trying to be kind when you wanted to scream, saying it's okay when your soul was shattered? This need for acceptance is so ancient it seems natural. Jung showed that it stems from the instinctive fear of being rejected by the tribe, the group, the society. The persona was created to protect us, but the price is high. The danger is that man becomes identical with the persona. In this way, he is no longer what he really is, but only what he appears to others, wrote Jung. And you, when was the last time someone saw you without the mask? The persona doesn't ask, it doesn't seek permission, it acts alone. It smiles for you when you're sad. It agrees when you want to disagree. It reaches out when your heart wants to withdraw. Over time, you forget who you really are, and others never get to know you. Your friendships, your loves, your family relate only to your acceptable, polished, controlled version, not to you. This isn't intimacy, it's theater. And in this theater, everyone plays a role. The funny friend, the ever-strong partner, the obedient son. Have you ever wondered which role you chose to play so that the others wouldn't stray? When you merge with the character, you forget the actor behind it. And no one, not you, not others, knows who inhabits that body anymore. That's why so many friendships end when someone dares to be honest. When the patient mother explodes. When the helpful friend says no. When you finally admit you're not okay. That's when the mask slips. And many don't know how to deal with what they see, because they never really wanted to know you. Jung didn't condemn the persona. It's necessary for us to coexist without hurting each other. But he warned against confusing it with our soul. The persona should be a tool, not an identity. Only when we accept the truth, that there's much more to us than what we reveal, can we open ourselves to what Jung called authentic encounter. That's where intimacy is born. That's when someone can finally touch your essence. It all begins when you notice the rigidity of this mask. When you begin to ask yourself, is this thing I'm showing really me? Or is it just what they expect me to be? This awareness hurts, but it hurts less than the loneliness of never being seen. Because without this courage, all you'll have are lukewarm, fragile, theatrical relationships. What you need to be truly loved is the courage to be seen. Jung reminds us, the persona is only a compromise between the individual and society, but it is never the person himself. You are not your mask. You are not your performance. And only those who dare to show who they truly are can discover who is truly loved. People may back away when you let the mask slip, but the ones who stay, they will have the privilege of knowing you completely. And that is rare. It is precious. It is human. So I ask you, who are you when no one is looking? Who have you forgotten you were? And who among all those around you would have the courage to love you like that? And even when the mask finally begins to slip, you discover that there's something even deeper hidden within you. Something that even the persona couldn't completely erase. Something you avoid looking at because you fear what you'll find. Jung called this in the shade, and it's largely responsible for making your relationships so fragile and distant. Because until you come to terms with your own darkness, you'll continue to sabotage any chance of true intimacy. The shadow isn't evil. It's humanity. It's all those impulses, desires, and feelings you've learned you can't have. And so you've hidden them in a dark corner of your soul. but they're still there, growing silently, and every now and then, they escape. In the anger that explodes out of nowhere, in the envy disguised as constructive criticism, in the secret pleasure you feel when someone fails. The shadow is your own denied truth, waiting to be acknowledged. As Jung said, what we deny in ourselves appears in our lives as destiny. And destiny, in this case, is your relationships repeating themselves in cycles of hurt and superficiality. It's easier to believe that others are the ones who disappoint you. Easier to think that your friends are selfish, that your family doesn't understand, that no one is willing to love you fully. But look honestly, aren't you the one holding this back? Every time you hide your vulnerability, every time you swallow sadness to appear strong, every time you judge those who dare show their weakness, you're feeding your shadow. And the more you reject it, the more it sabotages you. Have you ever noticed how you always get irritated by the same type of person? The friend who's too selfish, the colleague who needs attention, the sibling who never grows up. What if I told you these people merely mirror what you refuse to see in yourself? It's what Jung called projection, seeing in others what you can't bear to admit in yourself. You blame others so you don't have to face your own truth. This is one of the main reasons behind the superficiality of relationships. Until you embrace your shadow, you can't embrace the shadow of others. Until you continue to pretend to be only light, you don't have the courage to love someone who is also shadow and light at the same time. Because it's easier to remain in the theater of personas, where everyone claims to be fine, where no one cries, where everyone smiles for the audience and suffers behind the curtain. I know it's not easy to look within. I know it hurts. But Jung also taught us that the pain of awareness is less than the pain of living an inauthentic life. When you dare to acknowledge the parts you've hidden, your envy, your vanity, your fragility, your anger, your neediness, you not only free yourself, but you also open a space of compassion for yourself and for others, because only those who accept themselves whole can accept others whole too. And this is where relationships begin to change. You stop demanding perfection from others. You stop projecting your demons onto them. You stop being hurt by unrealistic expectations. You start seeing people as they truly are, human, complex, beautiful in their contradictions. And this vision is rare. It's powerful, because only from it can something true be built. This is perhaps the most difficult journey there is, to stop running from oneself and finally encounter the other. Jung called this individuation becoming whole, uniting light and shadow, persona and essence, conscious and unconscious. It's a lonely journey at first, but it's the only one capable of preparing us for true intimacy. Because as he himself said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. So if you feel ready to take this step to truly look at yourself, to reconcile with your shadow and transform your relationships, I invite you to stay here, to delve deeper into this conversation with me. Since you've come this far, since something in you resonates with these words, subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey. Maybe it's time to stop hiding. Maybe it's time to finally be seen. And I ask you, what are you waiting for to know yourself, to let someone else know you too? And when you begin to glimpse the shadow, when you finally dare to face it, something curious happens. You realize it's not just within you that it lives. It's reflected in others too. Every relationship you've ever had, every friendship that ended in pain, every person who seemed to betray you, all these encounters were just mirrors, broken mirrors, showing pieces of who you are and what you still can't accept in yourself. And this realization can be hard, because you begin to realize you've never seen anyone completely and maybe no one has seen you either. Jung called this phenomenon projection. It's an invisible but powerful mechanism that distorts our relationships without us even realizing it. You don't see the other person as they truly are. You see your own wounds projected onto them. That's why certain people irritate us so much. That's why others enchant us almost magically. It's not about them. It never was. It's about us. Think about that friend you always accused of being selfish. That person who seemed to use you, who only thought of themselves. Is that really true? Or was it that deep down, you envied their ability to prioritize themselves, because you never allowed yourself to do so? Or that friend you judged for being too needy? Maybe because you have that neediness too, but you've learned to hide it behind a facade of independence. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, and that is one of the hardest truths to swallow. We idealize others. We demonize them. We turn them into villains or saviors according to our own unconscious needs. How many times have you felt deeply attracted to someone, only to later be disappointed to discover that person was nothing like you imagined? That's what projection does. It creates an image, a fantasy, and you fall in love with that fantasy, or hate it, but never see the real person behind it. This is one of the reasons relationships are so fragile. They're built on false images. You place expectations on someone to save you, to make you happy, to fill your void. You invest in them, the qualities you wish you had, but don't recognize in yourself. And when they fail, because they inevitably do, since no one can sustain such a role for long, you feel betrayed. But deep down you betrayed yourself first, by expecting them to be something they never promised to be. The same thing happens with friendships that fall apart for no apparent reason. You feel hurt, but you never ask yourself, what was I projecting onto this person? What part of myself did I refuse to embrace, and instead place on them? Jung reminds us that these projections are inevitable, but it's our responsibility to remove them, one by one, to finally see the other person as they are, an imperfect human being, with lights and shadows, as complex as you. When you begin to realize this, a new silence settles into your relationships. You begin to listen more, to look deeper. You begin to notice that behind each person's mask lies someone as scared, as tired, as wounded as you. And that changes everything. Because you stop demanding perfection, stop judging so quickly, stop being disappointed for reasons that weren't even the other person's fault. This is the beginning of a new kind of relationship, more real, more human, more bearable in its imperfection. When you remove the projection, the other stops being a mirror and becomes an encounter. A meeting of souls that, despite the masks, despite the shadows, can see each other, even if only for a few seconds. The broken mirror slowly mends itself. You'll still get angry, you'll still project, you'll still deceive yourself. But now, each time this happens, you'll ask yourself, why does this affect me so much? What inside me is trying to get my attention through this person? Because as Jung wrote, the most important meetings have already been arranged by souls before the bodies even see each other. And maybe all the pain we feel in our relationships is just an invitation to look within, finally whole, finally responsible for what we carry. And so you begin to realize that no one is a villain, no one is a savior, no one is a hero or a traitor. We are just human, trying each in our own way to deal with our own shadows and the projections that blind us. We are merely reflections of each other, broken mirrors, trying to remember what it's like to see ourselves whole. But there's an even deeper layer, and perhaps the most difficult to perceive, because it doesn't come from you alone. It's the part of your life that was never truly yours alone. You think your choices are free, that your thoughts are yours, that your tastes and even your fears were born with you. But Jung discovered that there's an invisible, silent inheritance shaping every step you take, collective unconscious. It's an underground river running within all of us, carrying ancient myths, patterns, and archetypes that make us act as everyone else has always acted. And that's why even your friendships, which seem so unique, end up following the same old scripts. From birth, we carry within us inherited images, archetypes, that teach us what it means to be a child, a friend, a lover, an enemy, a hero, a victim. These are old stories that repeat themselves, generation after generation. You think you're choosing who to connect with, but often you're just reconnecting with familiar figures, unconsciously drawn to roles you learned to play. The friend who always takes care of everyone carries the mother archetype. The friend who entertains the group, the court jester, the one who sacrifices themselves for others, the martyr. What about you? What role have you been playing without even realizing it? That's why certain groups always organize themselves the same way. There's always a leader. There's always someone to take the blame. There's always someone to keep the peace, and someone to break the rules. It doesn't matter who comes in or goes out. People change, but the roles are still there, ready to be filled, and you find yourself repeating patterns you've seen before, unable to break out of them. Jung warned us that the power of the collective unconscious is so powerful that it makes us confuse what is inherited with what is authentic. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it destiny. And this also explains why so many friendships end up feeling superficial. When you don't realize how trapped you are in inherited roles, you can't truly encounter the other person. You're not seeing the person in front of you. You're seeing the character they play in your story, and they in turn are seeing you through the same veil. Two strangers, each acting out an ancient myth, without ever truly meeting. This awareness is uncomfortable. It requires courage to ask, what of everything I feel and do in my relationships is truly mine? What do I do because it's always been this way? Because I learned it was right? Because I thought I needed it? And what in me hasn't yet dared to be born, because I was too busy repeating patterns? When you start asking these questions, something shifts. Suddenly you realize you may not be obligated to carry the weight of these stories, that you can choose, little by little, another path. And ironically, it's only when you realize how collective you are that you begin to discover who you truly are, because you no longer need to blindly obey inherited voices. You can acknowledge them, honor them, but also create something new. In your friendships, this is reflected in the courage to no longer accept roles that suffocate you, to no longer demand of others that they be what you expect, but to make space for them to be who they truly are. This is the principle of individuation, separating yourself from the crowd, finding yourself and still remaining human. Because it's not about rejecting the collective, it's part of who we are, but about ceasing to be just the collective, and also being unique. And that transforms everything. You stop losing yourself in friendships that were never truly yours. You stop living stories you no longer need to live. You stop demanding that others fill roles that never belong to them. You begin to see the other as someone free too. Someone who doesn't need to be the mother, the martyr, the savior, the villain. Someone who can just be themselves. It's at this moment that true encounters are born. An encounter between two people who dare to be more than the stories they inherited. And it's not easy. You'll feel scared. You'll slip back into old roles from time to time. But each time you dare to be mindful, you step outside the script and write your own narrative. Jung reminded us that only then can we stop being puppets. Man only becomes truly free when he assumes responsibility for his unconscious. This freedom begins with an honest look at yourself, and perhaps also with a gesture of gratitude for those who inspire you to continue this journey. If you felt this inward gaze resonate with you so far, enjoy this moment, because every time you allow yourself to reflect like this, you help break the cycle of repetition and create something new, something more truthful. And there's no gesture too small in this direction. And when you finally begin to realize that many of your relationships are not only superficial but also repetitive, a void arises that's hard to name. It's the silence between you and others. An unspoken space, filled with everything no one dares to show. And when you begin to listen to this silence, you realize it's always been there. In the small talk, the automatic laughter, the vows of friendship, beneath every word exchanged, an unspoken truth. No one truly shows their whole self. No one dares to be seen, and neither do you. This silence isn't just an absence of sound, it's made of fear. Fear of rejection, fear of ridicule, fear of being fragile in front of others. From an early age you learn that some parts of yourself are unacceptable, so you silence them. You swallow your pain so as not to upset. You swallow your anger so as not to break. You swallow the truth so as not to hurt. Little by little, the mask solidifies, and silence settles between you and everyone around you, and you continue smiling at each other, pretending there's nothing between you, pretending this is friendship. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And this refusal to confront the soul is what creates silence. Because if you dare speak, the surface cracks. And if you dare listen, you might not like what you hear. It's easier to get lost in distractions, in safe conversations, in predictable interactions. It's easier to say everything's fine than to confess that inside everything seems to be falling apart. But when you realize this, something starts to hurt. Because you look around and realize that no one has ever told you who you really are. And most painfully, you've never told them who you really are. Maybe that's why you feel like no one knows you. Because in fact, no one does. How could they? You've grown accustomed to hiding the most intimate parts of yourself. You've taught others that they weren't welcome. So they only know what you show, and what you show is only a fraction of what exists. The silence between you and the other isn't just yours, it's also theirs. Each carrying within themselves an unshared universe. Each with their own mask, their own shadow, their own unspoken fears. Each afraid of being rejected, like you. You meet, but don't touch. You listen to each other, but don't hear each other. Because there isn't enough courage to break the tacit pact. I don't show who I am, and you don't show who you are. That's what makes so many relationships feel lukewarm, even with all their apparent intensity. That's what makes you feel alone, even when surrounded by people. This silence is a collective prison, and the key is within you. Because when you finally have the courage to speak for real, something changes. The silence breaks. Not because the other person immediately knows how to handle your vulnerability, but because you're no longer willing to pretend. And even if the other person's response isn't what you expected, it's still a relief, because for once you haven't betrayed yourself. Silence also resides in gestures. In the touch you refrain from seeing for fear of appearing weak. In the tear you hold back for fear of appearing needy. In the hug you refuse to give for fear of being rejected. Every gesture you hold back is an unspoken word. And all these gestures, accumulated, build a wall between you. An invisible wall, but so thick that no one can penetrate it. When you begin to recognize this wall, you begin to see how tired you are of maintaining it. Because it doesn't protect. It isolates. It blocks pain, but it also blocks love. It protects your apparent dignity, but at the expense of your humanity. And you begin to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth preserving this perfect image? If to do so, I have to remain alone, even when surrounded by people. That's why Jung so insisted on the importance of facing your own soul. Because only when you face it, even with all the painful and imperfect things it contains, can you begin to open yourself to others. It's only when you recognize that you too are flawed, that you can embrace the other's flaws. It's only when you have the courage to say what you feel that someone, perhaps for the first time, has the courage to truly respond. And when that happens, even if only for a moment, the silence between you is broken, and you see each other. Not the masks, not the roles, not the characters, but the souls. The souls that have always been there, hidden behind the personas, waiting for someone to see them. And even if it hurts, even if it's difficult, this moment is worth everything. Because it's in that instant that you realize, this is why we're here. To be seen, to see each other, to break the silence, to remember that, despite everything, we can still find each other. And when this silence finally begins to break, when even for a brief moment, you dare to show yourself and see the other, it's inevitable. Pain sets in. Not the same old pain. That pain of disguised loneliness, of emptiness, disguised as companionship. But a raw, almost unbearable pain, of realizing how much everything was always a lie. How many relationships you believed to be true were just unconscious agreements to avoid touching what truly matters. How much you spent your entire life believing you were loved, when in reality you were only accepted for who you pretended to be. This is the pain of discovering that love, almost always, hurts. You start to remember all the times you gave yourself completely, expecting to be accepted, and received only indifference or judgment. You remember when you tried to show a wound and someone walked away, as if your pain were too ugly to be seen. You remember when you expected reciprocity, but found only another wall. It's inevitable to feel anger, to feel sadness, to feel that perhaps no one in the world is capable of truly loving who you are inside. Jung said that love is only possible when two people have the courage to show themselves in their entirety, light and shadow, and still choose to remain. But almost no one reaches this level of awareness, because truly loving isn't comfortable. It's looking at the other without illusions, and yet not backing down. It's perceiving their contradictions, their ugliness, their broken pieces, and not turning away. And the hardest part, allowing the other to see all of this in you. Love hurts because most people don't love others. They love what others do for them, what others project onto them, what others represent in their own unconscious stories. Have you ever wondered how many times you've been truly loved? How many times someone looked at you and saw you? Not the mask, not the persona, not the role you played, but you, with all your fears and flaws. And have you ever wondered how many times you've done this for someone? This realization is painful because it dismantles all fantasies. You begin to realize how unfair you were to others for expecting a love you yourself didn't know how to give, and how unfair they were to you for expecting you to be someone you couldn't be. All of us, trapped in our own masks, asking for love without having learned to give it. When you finally allow yourself to feel this pain without running from it, something subtle begins to shift. Because now you know true love is not without pain. It is not without conflict. It is not without disappointment. It is only possible when there is the courage to go through it all. When there is the courage to remain, even after illusions have fallen. As Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And transformation is inevitably painful. But this pain isn't destructive. Quite the opposite. It's proof that for the first time, you're touching something real. It's the sign that you've begun to see yourself and the other. It's the price of truth. You miss the times when things were easier, when all you had to do was smile, pretend, and follow the routine without thinking. But there's no going back. Once you've seen it, there's no unseeing it. Once you've felt it, there's no way to completely numb it, and it can be lonely. Because now you clearly see how most people still prefer lukewarm, safe, fake relationships. How few are still willing to face the risk of loving with their souls bare. But that doesn't mean you need to close your heart again. It just means you now know how to choose more consciously. That you now have the chance to no longer settle for less than a genuine encounter. You also begin to realize that true love only arises when you're willing to endure not only the other person's pain, but your own pain before them. To see your own wounds reflected in them, and not run away. To hold their hand even when what you see isn't beautiful, but human. Because that's what transforming love consists of, not perfection, but courage. Not constant lightness, but depth. And in that moment, even with all the pain, something inside you finally rests. Because now you understand that this has always been the essence of love, bearing the weight of being human together with someone. Without masks, without lies, without the illusion that it won't hurt. And yet choosing to remain, choosing to stay, choosing to see, and be seen, even when it hurts. All. And it's only after you've gone through the pain of true love, that pain that tears, but also reveals, that you begin to notice something else. A kind of timid light, emerging through the cracks the pain left in you, because the masks, however resistant they were, can no longer hold up after so much weight. The layers begin to give way, and for the first time you begin to see and be seen, and you realize it's precisely in the cracks that the light enters, and that you begin, finally, to find meaning in all of this. Cracks aren't flaws. They're proof that you tried, that you dared to expose yourself, to surrender, to love, even without guarantees. They're open scars that show the other person who you truly are, that you bleed, that you feel, that you're not a perfect person. And it's this, precisely this, that creates space for the other person to show themselves too. Jung said there's no true encounter without risk, and the greatest risk is letting yourself be broken, even without knowing if the other person will stay to help pick up the pieces. You begin to look back and understand why so many bonds fell apart along the way. It wasn't often a lack of love. It was a lack of courage to let the light in. You begin to remember the times you were hurt, but also hurt. The times someone tried to show themselves to you, and you backed away, afraid of seeing too much. Because seeing too much in others also means seeing too much in yourself. How many times have you run away from friendships or relationships because they confronted you with something you didn't want to feel? A fear, a desire, an insecurity, a fragility. We've all done it. This is what cracks teach us. They force us to stop pretending we're whole all the time. They remind us that wholeness isn't about never breaking, but about accepting the broken pieces and starting over. Each crack is a chance to make room for something truer, for someone to see what's beneath the surface, and for you too to see what's hidden beneath others' masks. And here you realize a new truth. Intimacy isn't born from two perfect people coming together. It's born when two imperfections meet and accept their cracks as part of the journey. You stop trying to protect yourself all the time. You stop running away whenever someone gets too close. You stop judging the other person for not being exactly what you dreamed they would be, because now you understand no one will ever live up to your persona's fantasies, but someone can indeed live up to your soul if you have the courage to let it show. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming whole, is not a linear achievement. It happens piecemeal, in fits and starts, between mistakes and new beginnings. And it happens above all, in relationships, because only in the mirror of the other can we see who we truly are. That's why he reminded us, man's fullest life does not consist in harmony, without conflict, but in enduring the opposites in himself and in others. You begin to realize that everyone is trying. Every person you've ever been angry with, disappointed by, or charmed by, they're all trying to be seen, trying to feel less alone within their own masks, and this changes the way you look at them. Judgment gives way to compassion, silence gives way to listening, anger gives way to tenderness, and here something new is born, a desire to share, to tell someone what you've noticed, what you feel, to tell someone, I'm like that too, because when you verbalize your cracks, you allow them to become bridges that span the silence. Bridges that connect one heart to another, and that's rare, it's precious, it's what we all seek, even if secretly. Maybe now you understand why so many people prefer to stay in the theater, why so many people run away, because it's easier not to feel, it's easier not to look at the cracks, but it's in them that beauty resides, it's in them that truth resides, it's in them that light resides. And if you've come this far with me, if these words have touched any of your own personal nerves, I'd like to hear from you, because every inner journey gains more meaning when shared. You too carry your lights and shadows, your masks and your truths, and talking about this is an act of courage. Talking about it is also a way of reminding the world that we are not alone. What do you see in your own cracks? What have you found by looking at them honestly? I'm curious to hear. Because every story, every confession, every truth shared is another crack that turns into light. Once you begin to see the cracks, yours and others, a new kind of awareness emerges, more uncomfortable, deeper, almost too strange to embrace at first, because it's at that moment that you realize, inside you lives someone you don't fully know, a strange figure, with desires you won't admit, with emotions you censor, with memories you'd rather forget. Jung called this figure the strange in ourselves, and he said that until we make peace with him, we will continue to be doomed to sabotage our relations. This strangeness appears in subtle ways in everyday life, in the discomfort you feel when someone gets too close and you withdraw for no reason, in the disproportionate anger that explodes at a small gesture, in the sudden feeling of inadequacy, even in places where you should feel comfortable, as if there were another person inside you, reacting without you understanding why. And indeed, there is. This stranger is made of everything you've rejected about yourself. It holds the memories of times you felt ashamed of who you were. It holds the desires you learned you shouldn't have. It holds your wounded child, your tired adult, your aggressive side, your needy side. It even holds your sensitivity, if it was repressed for fear of appearing weak. It holds ultimately your entire humanity. Everything you tried to hide from the world stayed there. Jung said this figure is one of the most important aspects of the inner journey, because as long as you continue fighting it, you will continue fighting yourself. And all this internal war is reflected in your relationships. You don't trust others because deep down, you don't trust yourself. You don't tolerate their flaws because you don't tolerate yours. You don't accept their vulnerability because you haven't yet accepted your own. The stranger in you is not your enemy. It is the forgotten part of you. It is the bridge that allows you to finally feel whole. But most people keep it locked in a dark room, afraid to face what it has to say, afraid that by opening the door, it will dismantle everything you believed yourself to be. And it will indeed dismantle, but only to rebuild in a truer way. When you finally stop running away from him and invite him to talk, something amazing happens. You discover he's not so scary after all. He doesn't want to destroy you. He wants to be recognized. He wants to be accepted. He wants to be included in your story. Because as Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it destiny. And you begin to realize that the stranger within you isn't just shadow, it's also light. It carries your creativity, your intuition, your strength, your courage to be different. It carries the spontaneity you've forgotten. It carries the tenderness you were afraid to show. It carries all the potential you stifled to fit the persona you believed others wanted to see. By connecting with it, you change the way you relate. Because by accepting it in yourself, you become able to accept it in others. You no longer feel so scared when someone shows their ugly face, because you know you have one too. You no longer judge so much when someone fails, because you know you fail too. You no longer get hurt so easily by the silence of others, because you already know how difficult it is to break your own silence. This encounter with the stranger itself is painful at first, but liberating later. It opens space for a more genuine intimacy with the people around you, because you no longer need to pretend to be someone you're not, and you no longer require them to pretend for you. You can finally encounter each other, not as masks, but as whole human beings, with lights and shadows, with cracks and bridges, and this transforms not only your friendships, but also your relationship with yourself, because you stop seeing yourself as a battlefield and start seeing yourself as a home, where all your parts have a place. The stranger is no longer an enemy, hiding in the basement. They become a companion on your journey, someone you welcome, someone who helps you remember who you truly are beneath all the layers. When you acknowledge this stranger and let them sit at the table, you also give others permission to do the same. And perhaps, deep down, that's all we all want, to find someone from whom we no longer need to hide anything. Because it's only when we become intimate with ourselves that we become capable of intimacy with others. And it's at this point in the journey, when you can now look at the stranger within yourself without so much fear, when you can feel your cracks throbbing like living scars, when you can already see the masks peeling from your face, that another, inevitable reality imposes itself. Awareness has a price, and for many it's too high, because opening your eyes to who you truly are, and who others truly are, also means seeing everything you've lost along the way. And that hurts. When you see the hidden dynamics that have always governed your relationships, you also realize how much you've given up living to fit in, how much you've mutilated yourself to fit in, how much you've kept quiet so as not to disturb, how much you've accepted crumbs of connection so as not to be alone. It's like waking from a dream and realizing the scenario was false, that the friends you had didn't know you, only what you allowed them to see, that the people you gave yourself to weren't ready to see your shadows, and neither were you ready to see theirs, and there's no unseeing. Once you become aware, you can no longer completely fool yourself. You can even try, put on the mask again, act as before, laugh at the same things, maintain the same habits, but you no longer feel the same, because now you know superficial relationships are comfortable, but they don't fulfill. Shallow conversations are light, but they don't warm. Conditioned affection is stable, but it doesn't transform, and that changes everything. Jung said that there is no awakening of consciousness without pain, and he was right, because seeing the truth doesn't automatically mean being able to change it. You will still feel alone at times, even when surrounded by people. You will still hesitate to show who you are, afraid of alienating those who don't want or can't handle your authenticity. You will still oscillate between the need to belong and the need to be true to yourself. But the difference is that now you do it with your eyes open. You're no longer on autopilot. You start choosing where to put your energy, choosing who to share your truths with, choosing which masks still make sense in certain situations, and which ones you no longer want to wear. Because being conscious doesn't mean abandoning your persona completely, but using it consciously, without fully identifying with it. This new lucidity, however, can alienate some people, and that hurts too. You realize that many prefer you to remain the version they've learned to love, that your depth frightens them, that your vulnerability disconcerts them, and you feel the loneliness of those who walk ahead, of those who can no longer accept anything less than a genuine encounter. This is one of the greatest tests of emotional maturity, accepting the loss of old relationships to make room for more authentic ones. And yet there's also a certain relief in this, because you stop begging for affection. You stop mutilating yourself to fit in. You stop blaming others for not seeing you, when it was you who were hiding. You begin to realize that each loss is also an empty space that can be filled with something new, that each goodbye is a doorway for people to arrive who not only support who you are, but celebrate you. Awareness has a price, but it also has a reward: freedom. The lightness of no longer having to pretend all the time. The silent joy of knowing that even if few truly see you, those few are enough, because they see the real you, not your persona, not your performance, not your character. They see your essence, and that alone is enough to warm everything that once felt cold. Jung wrote that to be whole is ultimately more important than to be good. And perhaps this is the greatest gift of consciousness, to allow yourself to be whole, even if it bothers you, even if it alienates you, even if it hurts, because only then can you stop being a prisoner of other people's expectations. Only then can you finally love and be loved without needing to hide. And it is only after you have walked through all of this, the masks that have fallen, the cracks that have shown, the stranger you have finally embraced, the losses that consciousness has exacted, that you begin to experience what Jung called authenticity. It's subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like a light breeze coming through a window you didn't even remember leaving open. But suddenly you take a deeper breath, and you understand there's an immense privilege in being seen. Not the you everyone thought they knew, but the real you, the whole, the contradictory, the human you. You realize how rare it is to find someone who has the courage to look you in the eye without expecting you to play a role, who listens to what you say without trying to fix it, who accepts your shadows without having to erase them to feel comfortable. And perhaps, finally, you've become that person, not just for yourself but for others as well, because by allowing yourself to be seen, you invite others to do the same, and that is transformative. You start to notice little things changing. Conversations become quieter, but deeper. Hugs become less performative, but more real. Even loneliness changes tone. It's no longer that crushing void, but a fertile space where your essence can flourish without needing applause. Because now you no longer need to lose yourself to be accepted. You've learned to accept yourself first, and that changes everything. Little by little, you stop measuring relationships by the number of words exchanged, promises made, or messages left unanswered. You begin to value the encounters that truly happen, the ones where two souls look at each other honestly and say, even silently, "I see you," with all your wounds, with all your history, with all your contradictions. I see you, and you, for the first time, believe it. This is a privilege few experience, and perhaps that's why, throughout this journey, you've felt different, a little out of place, a little out of step with the times. Because not everyone is ready to see or be seen, but that doesn't diminish the value of the path you've traveled. Quite the opposite. It only shows how rare your courage is, how your decision to shed your personas and face your own shadow makes you someone willing to live a life worth living. Jung reminded us that the deepest meaning of life is not superficial happiness, but the fulfillment of being who you are, completely. And you can no longer go back, because now you know what it means to be true. Even if the truth scares you, even if it hurts, even if it costs more than the mask. And this awareness is a gift no one can take away from you. So look back for a moment. See everything you've been through. See the lies you left behind. See the courage you had to see yourself, to transform yourself, to allow yourself. See the layers you've peeled away. You're not the same anymore, and that's something to be proud of. Because you chose a path many avoid their entire lives. The path home, back to yourself. And also look ahead, to all that can still be built, to the true encounters that still await you, to the souls you will still touch, simply by daring to be who you are, to the relationships that will be born in the most beautiful place, the one where no one needs to pretend anymore. I wanted you to know that this path isn't easy, but it's beautiful. That it doesn't end here, it never ends. Each new layer you uncover opens up space for more light, for more shadow, for more life. And if you've come this far with me, it's because something inside you already knows this. Something inside you is already ready to take the next step. And that's why I want to ask you, if these words touch something deep inside your heart, don't let this reflection end now. Enjoy this moment you've had with yourself. Subscribe to continue following this journey with me. And most importantly, share with me in the comments what touched you most. What mask did you recognize in yourself? What crack can you now see with love? I will read every word, because each story is proof that we're on this journey together. You are more than the masks you've learned to wear. You are more than the pain you hide. You are more than the stories you've unknowingly repeated. You are, above all, someone who dares to see themselves. And that is the greatest privilege of all. Don't forget that. Never again.